Hello and welcome to this episode of the REBT Advocates with Dr. Michael R. Adelstein of 3minutetherapy.com. You can find his book, 3-Minute Therapy, Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life at therebt.life. You'll find it linked below, and you can email us both at rebtadvocates@gmail.com. I am Tommy Bateman, licensed professional counselor out of Virginia. And today we have something very special that we want to share. We back in episode 10, I think we taught you the basic steps of REBT, and we're going to keep doing it today because what I love about REBT is that we can transfer the skills necessary to folks that aren't necessarily professionals. And I think you're going to see some of that today. So we have Rod, not a professional, but man, an REBT enthusiast. There he is, right there. Michael, why don't you help introduce our guest a little bit more?
Okay, thanks, Tommy. And I just wanted to mention that today is a special occasion for a few reasons. One is, I believe it's our 100th podcast.
It is.
Is that how you count, Tommy?
Yeah, I count 100, and so that makes it very special to me. 3 digits for once.
And going strong. Mm-hmm. And also, Tommy's back, as you see, and we have a special guest, Rod. And I'm Michael Edelstein. I have a REBT practice, remote, in person, and I have a number of books. The most popular one is called 3-Minute Therapy. Okay, Rod, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. As Tommy mentioned, Rod is an REBT enthusiast, but has some questions about applying REBT and theory and practice. So Rod, what would you like help with?
Well, I have some issues involved in my relationships with women that I'm trying to apply the REBT principles to. So I have a twofold question. One is rejection. Now, when a woman accepts me and we begin dating and we have a relationship, I feel good about myself as a person in totality. But if a woman rejects me, cancels our plans, flakes on getting together, or ends the relationship, I feel bad about myself as a person. And where I'm struggling with is separating that from my quote unquote self-esteem, my sense of self-worth, and also having trouble disputing without the help of a therapist. Because I feel like when I try the thought records, if I could already dispute on my own, then I wouldn't necessarily need to do the thought record. So I'm having that problem. So there's also an anger issue, because oftentimes in my relationships with women, I get angry when I don't get what I want. And I'm trying to find the must, but it's such an ingrained habit of getting upset when I don't get what I want that I feel frustrated that I'm not able to apply the REBT principles successfully on my own.
Okay, well, there's a lot to unpack there, Jerome. Now, one of the main strategies of REBT, not the only one, there are many, but one of the main ones is using the 3-minute exercise. And the 3-minute exercise pretty much lays out the process very nicely, where this goes from A to F. A is your activating event or the situation you find yourself in. B is your irrational belief, or what you're telling yourself that's unreasonable, that leads to C, your undesirable emotional consequence. Now, we know if you're feeling like a good person or a bad person, or if you are angry, we know that there's some demand there, because our disturbance and behavioral disturbance comes from our unrealistic thinking, more particularly in terms of demands. So let's take the situation, Jerome, where a woman rejects you. Mm-hmm. And A, the activating event would be is rejected. And then C is, I felt bad about myself. I felt like a loser. I felt worthless. How would you characterize your feeling?
Sure. I would say there's some self-downing. The thoughts that get triggered automatically, the first major thought is that
before we get to the thoughts, Jerome, let's take one step at a time. Oh. So C is self-downing. A is you were rejected. Yeah, and then C, right. You are to put yourself down.
Exactly.
As we know, it's never A that causes C. No situation, no matter how obnoxious, could force you to put yourself down. That's your choice, and that comes irrational belief, and that normally begins with a demand. I must, or I should, or I must not, or I need something. How would you
Right.
finish that sentence?
I need her approval. I need her acceptance. Um, I automatically think if you're ready to talk about the B's, the beliefs, I think there's something wrong with me, and then I say, well, if there was nothing wrong with me, then she would approve of me. So it proves that there is something wrong with me because she didn't approve of me. So it becomes circular in a way mentally.
Right. Is I need her approval,
Right.
and there's something wrong with me because she did the opposite. She rejected me.
Right.
Okay, so at A, B, and C, we diagnosed the problem in brief. A was she rejected you. B was you told yourself, I need her approval or I must not be rejected, and there's something rotten about me because I was rejected. And that is C, self-downing.
Right.
Does that make sense?
There's another part. Sorry to cut you off, Dr.
Any
Elstein.
questions about that, Jerome?
No, that's one part of it. The
Yeah.
other part of it is the anger part where I get upset that I'm not going to get what I want from the woman. So for me, it's like a depression and also an anger that gets triggered when that activating event happens.
Okay, so this illustrates something for our viewers which might be useful, and that is if you have multiple disturbed feelings, it's usually best to start with one. Now, if you've been doing it many years or you mastered it, then you can start combining things. But usually at first, it's best to start with just one. So we're starting with the self-downing.
Okay. I have a question, Dr. Elstein, about the ABCDEF format. How,
Yeah.
when I look at the B's, you said I would know that it's irrational when I see a must or a demand. If I don't see a must or a demand, hypothetically, I won't get upset, and therefore my beliefs are not irrational, because I'm having a hard time knowing when a thought is rational versus irrational.
Yeah. Tommy, did you want to take that one?
Well, I mean, sometimes it is difficult because of the way we phrase certain things. That we say, well, I only strongly prefer it, but I am still getting very upset about this particular issue.
Exactly.
Even when, though, sometimes we may be telling ourselves, well, I must have what I strongly prefer. So it's kind of an extra layer on top of it, and we aren't telling ourselves that, aren't acknowledging that there is a must there. What we're saying, what we're thinking, something we may not actually be thinking. Because I think you may say I strongly prefer to have the approval of women, and there may be the extra must there behind it, saying I must have what I want, what I strongly prefer. That is a possibility.
Right.
So I usually find more layers to it than just the initial belief. Sometimes we have to pull apart that onion. Michael, did I stumble over my words there? Because I did, and I'm a bad person for it.
No, that was very good. But to add to that, Rod, whenever you have a disturbed emotion, that's a red flag saying you have a must or a should in there somewhere. So if you
Okay.
come up with a preference, then I think as Tommy is alluding to, it's probably a must.
Yeah. And let me add,
Just a preference. What, Tommy?
it's always, if you, and just as Michael said there, it's almost axiomatic. If there is a disturbed emotion, there has to be a demand somewhere. So if you don't find it right away, keep digging, is what I suggest.
How would you suggest you keep digging? What tools would you recommend?
Well, one tool you can recommend is look at the derivatives of a must. A must is an absolute. It means things absolutely should be the way I want them to be 101% of the time, no exceptions. So because it's an absolute, it usually leads to global evaluations like I'm no good, or I can't stand it, or this is the end of the world. So if you don't tune into a must, then look at one of those others. And you mentioned another one, and that is there's something rotten about me, or there's something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the must doesn't really ring a bell, you can work with there's something rotten about me. If and you put that at B, that's becomes the irrational belief that you question, that you go on to work with.
Okay.
So sometimes people are more aware of their musts and demands, musts and shoulds, and sometimes people are more aware of their self-downing. They're
Right.
thinking they're no good, they're worthless about me, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Okay, so so we have A, B, and C. Any other questions about that, Rod?
No, not at all.
Okay. Okay, so then the issue is, what can you do about it? And the answer is go on to D. D is disputing or questioning the irrational belief. And that's a question. It's a simple process. You just take what you have at B and put why, or what is the evidence in front of it. What is the evidence I must not be rejected? And what is the evidence there's something rotten about me because I was rejected? So those are some good questions that you would put at D.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And this is where you learn to become your own therapist over time eventually, because that's a skill, correct? The disputing is, I've watched some of your podcasts before, you and Tommy. It sounds like the disputing is very crucial to finding emotional relief from doing this.
Yes, yeah. D, or put it another way, D, E, and F focus on
Mm-hmm.
the solution, and A, B, and C focus on diagnosing the problem. Tommy, we had something to add there?
Yeah, and if you, as you watched before, I really do stress the disputing portion, and so yeah, it is a skill that you get better at, and there's multiple ways of doing it. I mean, practice is a way, and sometimes when you're stuck, keep plugging away at the disputing. You'll start to see different avenues. For example, earlier you said, well, where's the evidence that there's something wrong with me? And you said, well, she disapproves with me. Therefore, there's something wrong with me,
Right.
because she didn't like
Right.
something about me. But that was the point. All we know, what's the quality of that evidence? We have to actually question that. What's the quality of that particular evidence? I have to say, well, we don't know, all we know there is that she doesn't like something about you potentially. Or maybe maybe she rejected you because she doesn't want to do anything with anybody at this point in time, that she's having issues. So we have to know, all we know is that you were rejected, but we don't know why. We don't know. And even if she said to you, I rejected you because there's something wrong with you, that's not even evidence of something being wrong with you. That's more or less evidence of that she doesn't like something about you. And that's it. We can't take it any further than that, if you know what I mean. So, questioning the and I'm doing this pretty fast, Rod, so forgive me. But questioning the quality of the evidence that you have and what the evidence actually says, and don't taking it beyond what the evidence actually says, if you know what I mean. Michael?
Yes, and what Tommy is discussing is E. Is that right, Tommy? E, effective new thinking, a new way to look at it.
I mix them together. What can I say? I lump a lot in the D portion.
Yeah. Okay. So normally, and you could do it that way if you're more comfortable and that works for you. The bottom line with these exercises is do what's meaningful, what works for you. This is just a background or a backbone for it, but do it in a way that's meaningful and seems real to you. But normally after D, you just think about the question, look for the evidence, and then at E, you come up with the answers Tommy was illustrating. And also,
Can I ask you?
Tommy made a very good distinction there. And when you're saying there's something wrong with me, then that's self-downing. But as Tommy mentioned, if you say there's something at worst, if she's right, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not rich enough, or I'm not famous enough, you could say there's something wrong in her eyes about my traits, but that's not the entire me. And that's her
Right.
opinion.
Oh,
Rod,
that's
you were
what I
going
was
to
about
ask a
to ask you.
question?
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to ask you, how you would dispute the belief there's something wrong with me, and then looking towards the woman as evidence. So let's say for her, you're saying, well, she might say, well, he's not tall enough for me. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with not being tall in and of itself. And that's where I feel like I'm almost getting REBT and trying to question this evidence is understanding the truth and what's empirically like a fact. Because like for her, it might be, if you ask her, well, what's wrong with Rod? Well, Rod is only 6'5". I want a man who's 6'10" and plays the NBA. That doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong with being 6'4" or 6'5", but there's something wrong for her. And where I'm struggling with the
That's
REBT
right.
is separating it. You know, it's easy to see in other people, but when it comes to me, it's hard to apply it on myself.
Yeah.
And
Right.
you're applying a judgment to the fact. You said the fact is I'm 5'4" or I'm 6'2", whatever it is. That is fact. I can't get around that. I can't argue with it. It's an objective measurement. But then you put the judgment on top of it. It's wrong to be 6'2". Yeah.
Okay.
So no, it's just that's all we know is you're 6'2". We don't know
Right.
anything beyond that.
Right.
So again,
We don't even know. Sorry, we don't even know it's wrong in her eyes to be 6'2". If she rejects you, you don't know why. But the worst, let's assume it's her opinion, it's wrong for her. And as Tommy is saying, that doesn't make it absolutely wrong, universally wrong, generally wrong for all women, but that's her opinion. So one of the things you can remind yourself of, Rod, is this is her opinion. Her rejection comes from her opinion in her head. And her opinion of me, no matter how bad, cannot diminish me as a person. I'm still the same Rod as I was before me.
Is that the E? And now you're talking about an effective new philosophy?
Yes, yeah.
And the idea is you repeat that enough times, and then over time, I say in theory, but over time, if you keep repeating the effective new philosophy, you'll have a different emotional reaction to the same activating event.
Yeah, that's that. But there are caveats there. One is that it's meaningful, and if you keep repeating it, it may get stale and not seem real. So in that case, come up with other E's. And secondly, the more you have an E about why the must is false or why there's something rotten about you is false, the more persuasive it tends to be. So normally it wouldn't just be one statement, but it would be a number of statements. And it's not just repeating it, it means really thinking it through and understanding the meaning of it, not just repeating the words. The words represent meanings, but we're really trying to connect with meanings, and we use the words as a way to get at the meanings. But it's important to think what's underlying. How could you magically turn into a rotten person if a woman rejects you?
Okay.
Well, what's
That
the
makes
answer
sense.
to that, Rod? How can you
can't.
magically turn into?
You
Why
can't.
not? Why not? I say you can. Why? I say you're a rotten person now. She rejected you. Why am I wrong?
Well, because I've had some success with other women. So then do I magically become this perfect, almost godlike person because another woman accepts me? I'm still the same person.
That's right. And you mentioned that if a woman accepts you, then you feel really great about yourself. It's fine to feel great about it, but then you feel great about yourself. And it would be good to question that also. How does that make me a great person, God's gift to womankind, because this woman likes me? And what's
It doesn't. That's the thing. I've had success and I've had failures in my relationship with women, but I'm still the same person.
Exactly. And that's another good E statement, effectively thinking. I've had success and I've had failures with women, and I'm still the same person.
Okay.
With one less or one more woman to deal with.
Right. It keeps things in perspective.
Right. Right.
And that's
Now,
So
what
it does.
as
Yeah, Tommy, go on.
oh, what Michael's point about really believing it is very, very important to me. And as you said, we don't repeating and repeating. Well, you could be repeating the proper words, but the subtext of it is, psychopathological. It's not helpful words that the subtext is, or helpful meaning. So that's why when I dispute things, I beat it to death personally. I get to the point where absolutely, if someone approached me with the argument, I'm the best thing since sliced breads because I won a golf tournament, Tiger Woods. That was his downfall, by the way. I could automatically, let's just decimate that argument in my own head. Like, I'm not going to get a big head because I did really well on this YouTube video, which I do every time I'm on. And I just beat that down until I go, oh, I can't, there's no possible way I can believe that problematic belief. Yeah, so not just repeating it, it's actually really digging down and tearing things apart. And I rambled enough, Michael. I rambled enough.
Oh, that was good rambling. Good rambling. So any other questions about E, Jerome, before we go on to F, your new feeling?
no questions.
Okay, and then the final part of this exercise is F. F stands for your new feeling, which theoretically you'll get to once you, as Tommy said, beat it to death and uproot your musts and shoulds, kick them out, and see that they're toxic and make no sense. So as you get to that, then F will change. And at first it might be less anxious or less self-downing, and then
Less anger.
more, what's that?
Less anger.
Yes, if you're doing a 3-minute exercise on anger, then it would be less anger or just concern, appropriate negative emotions, concern, disappointment, frustration, but not anxiety, depression, or self-downing.
Okay, so that's with the thought record. Would you suggest that do a thought record every time I approach or meet a woman, whether things go good or bad? And then the second question is, can you do anything behaviorally to desensitize oneself to rejection? Instead of haphazardly having.
Yeah, the answer to both questions is yes. The first is a qualified yes, because your first question was do one of these, what you're calling a thought record or a 3-minute exercise, or a lot of people call it an ABC. Do this before risking rejection. Do it after risking rejection. May not be appropriate while you're talking to the woman, although you could teach her the 3-minute exercises if you want to.
That's a different strategy.
Yeah, right. But an even more important time to do it than those two times is on a regular basis, right? Add a 3-minute exercise or 2 3-minute exercises or 3 or 4 or 5, depending on how fast you want results, daily. And the more you immerse yourself in that, the quicker you'll tend to change.
On the same activating event, Dr. Edelstein, the same activating trigger, which we're talking about rejection, do 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 different thought records for that one specific activating event?
Yes, as long as it stays meaningful.
Okay.
And if not, you can change the activating event, come up with another. Did you want to say something?
Yeah. Rod, the best way to look at this is the best way to look at this objectively. So there, look at me with my semantic precision. The best way I look at it for me is I look at this like lifting weights, right? You don't prepare for the sports event by lifting weights just beforehand or just afterwards. You do it on a daily basis until you're prepped. Now, some people have alluded to the brain as building its own neural pathways, these own little muscles, neuromuscles in your brain, and you can strengthen them by, going down that road multiple times every single day until it becomes automatic. Just like anxiety is kind of a automatic thing, seemingly, but it actually goes through the ABCs itself. So that's why the daily practice, think of it like lifting weights, think of it like running a mile each day to prep yourself when it's time to be tested.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you,
that's a
Tommy.
good word. You're preparing for the big event, which is the rejection.
Right.
Then to answer your other question, Rod, about behavioral ways to work on this, and I'm glad you brought that up because usually working on overcoming your irrational beliefs is a two-pronged, could be three sometimes, and that is cognitively questioning, challenging, contradicting your musts and your self-downing, and also behaviorally. And one of the main things you can do behaviorally is risk rejection to women, ask them for their phone number or email address, ask them for tea or coffee again and again and again. Do that in practice along with questioning and challenging and contradicting the thoughts. You'll tend to minimize and get over these problems. Tommy, did you have a last word there?
Well, yeah, and to Rod's second question about anything behaviorally we can do, and just exactly what Michael said. I like to use the analogy of the Navy SEALs. Why do they go to Hell Week? It's you're staying up for a week straight. You're not eating well. You're not sleeping well, and you're pushing your body to the beyond what you ever thought was possible. But that's the point. You're pushing it. You keep pushing your boundaries until you start to realize, oh, I actually can do this, and it comes to be a kind of a reinforcing thing. So now there's guys that are instructor Navy SEALs that are doing Hell Week over and over again and actually enjoying themselves because they already know I can do this. I've done it before. I can do it again. I've been through worse. And I realized I could push myself a lot further than I thought. So exposure, some people just call it exposure to these challenging things, practicing it as you're practicing your 3-minute exercises and prepping for it for the big test will make you mentally tougher and more able to weather those rejections in the future for the big test, that one you really
Very good,
not be
very
rejected
important. Rod, we're nearing the end of time.
Yes.
Just
First,
this
yeah,
podcast,
I wanted to
not
say,
not in the universe.
oh,
And did you
okay.
have any final question?
Yeah, I wanted to know for myself and also for the listeners out there that do listen to this podcast, for you and Tommy, which REBT books or audios would you highly recommend for someone who's learning this on their own until they get the opportunity to work with a very good qualified REBT therapist? What are some of your favorite books personally, Dr. Edelstein and Tommy, to recommend towards myself and others?
I'm going to talk first. It is going to be 3-Minute Therapy, Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life with Dr. Michael R. Edelstein. You can find the link below at therebt.life. It is a wonderful distillation of the work of Albert Ellis and the experience of Dr. Michael R. Edelstein. It's beautiful, it's great, and it has it all right there for the layperson. Buy it now.
Thank you so much, Tommy. and I would say the same thing about your book once it comes out, and also any book by Albert Ellis. Rod, Albert Ellis has written over 80 books, so just go to Amazon, put in his name, and see what title relates to what you're working on. And in terms of things you can listen to or watch, Albert Ellis has a number of YouTube videos and lectures, so I highly recommend that. He's the master. He's the person who devised this whole approach and dramatically changed the course of therapy. And also, Tommy and I have podcasts, 100 now, as I mentioned some of those, and they're interviews of me. And just put in REBT in YouTube, and you'll get a lot of things to view and listen to. And if you put in REBT on Google, you'll get even more. Well, thank you, Rod, for joining us and being courageous enough to discuss a personal problem. I appreciate it. And
thank you, guys.
You're welcome. And for you viewers, you can let us know if you'd like to discuss a problem. And so volunteer for that. If you're a therapist watching, we also do supervision on the REBT Advocate. And comment below and give us a like, support us on Patreon, and subscribe to the REBT Advocates to stay on the life.